want to talk about Todd.
You have more evidence. There's more evidence than ever presented.
Let's talk
your
about
elections in this country. We're like a third world country.
But, sir,
your elections are crooked, and you're crooked, and Meet the Press is crooked, and so is ABC and CBS and CNN.
But, Mr. President,
you're one-sided crooked networks. All right, let's call it quits because I've had enough. Thank you, darling. Have a good time.
Mr. President, let's please. I traveled all the way to Wisconsin.
Okay, we're going to talk about that, along with what has been going on with the media in general and the 60 Minutes catastrophe that happened there. President Trump storming off after a combative interview with Meet the Press host Kristen Welker. We'll show more of that conversation as the president became increasingly upset when he faced pushback on several of his lies. And Jonathan Lemire, before we dive into the major breaking news with Iran, just talk about that interview in general, overall, big picture. I mean, he was incredibly rude to Kristen, called her names, called her a liar, called her stupid. But I was very interested in what he was insisting about the elections again and his focus on election lies. It seemed like he's ginning that up again. I think we've seen this before.
Yeah, this was taped Friday. He made a trip to Wisconsin. He's done very little domestic travel, but he was there. It was taped Friday, aired yesterday morning on Meet the Press. You could hear there was a big rainstorm. You could hear that on the roof of the structure they were in. But you're right. He returned to the big lie over and over and over again. Falsely claiming that he won in 2020. Certainly there are those who fear that he is setting up arguments for 2026 and 2028 for Republican candidates in both of those elections. Efforts, perhaps, we've heard from Democratic governors and other elected officials fearful that there will be efforts to try to steal these elections. And we saw President Trump in real anger, I think frustration bursting through about how very little is going right for him right now. His poll numbers in the 30s. He can't get out of the Iran war. The economy is, the prices are still too high. Republicans look like they're in real trouble this November. And to Kristen Welker's credit, she pushed back with facts. She asked him to provide evidence that the 2020 election was stolen. Of course, he can't provide that because it didn't happen. We saw federal judge after federal judge.
Federal judges.
Every ruling but one go against them. And that we know the election was not stolen. He lost in 2020, and he simply couldn't contain himself. And it was obviously very rude to her, very dismissive and unprofessional to her when she was simply doing her job. I thought she did a great job pushing back, but staying calm and respectful while doing so. But this is right. Though those claims were debunked again and again, it does seem like President Trump is setting those arguments once more.
And the war with the media again. Also with us, the co-host of the Rest is Politics podcast, the BBC's Katty Kay. Columnist and associate editor at the Washington Post, David Ignatius is with us. MS Now national affairs analyst John Heilman is here. He's partner and chief political columnist at POC and co-founder and editor-in-chief of Semaphore. Ben Smith joins us as well. We'll talk more about that interview and the media in general with Ben. But first, big news over the weekend. Israel and Iran trading strikes this morning in the most significant exchange of fire since the tenuous April truce. The ramped-up hostilities began over the weekend when Israel launched airstrikes on Beirut, which President Trump has told Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu not to do in an explosive call last week. Israeli attacks in Lebanon are a major sticking point in negotiations to end the war and a red line for Iran. Tehran, which has insisted Lebanon be included in any deal, retaliated by firing missiles at Israel for the first time in 2 months. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps called the attack a warning, saying future responses would be broader. Israel then responded by launching strikes toward Tehran, with Iranian state media reporting the sound of explosions in cities across Iran, adding that a chemical plant was hit. This, despite Axios reporting that President Trump urged Netanyahu to hold off on any retaliatory act in a Sunday phone call. That's according to a senior U.S. official and an Israeli source familiar with details of the call. President Trump also told the Financial Times on Sunday that Netanyahu had no choice but to accept a deal with Iran, saying, quote, "I call the shots. He doesn't call the shots." Also this morning, the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen joined the war for the first time since the ceasefire, firing missiles toward Israel. David Ignatius, first of all, did Israel defy the president? And is the president continuing to not understand the parties he's dealing with? I'll put it that way.
Not understand and certainly not be able to control. The collapse of the ceasefire yesterday after 2 months in which it more or less had held was really a striking sign that the American diplomatic effort has essentially failed to resolve the terms or bring anything like a real peace agreement. It's fascinating to see that Israel is chafing against President Trump almost as much as Iran is. Israelis were furious when President Trump, in effect, ordered them not to continue operations in Lebanon, which is nominally the trigger for Israel's strikes from Iran. The language that President Trump used with our colleague Ed Luce from the Financial Times, I call the shots. Netanyahu doesn't call the shots. It was an assertion that it's Donald Trump who's in control. The events yesterday showed how far that is from true, that Trump is observing these events, cannot control them. The efforts he's made, increasingly strenuous, to bring an end to this conflict don't seem to be working. And we're back in a tit-for-tat, missiles fired on Israel, missiles fired on Iran situation this morning. Somehow, I'm sure diplomats will try to put this back together. We'll have a new round of attempted talks. But the distance between Trump and Netanyahu today is one of the most striking factors of the conflict.
And we have seen this now a few times, Caddy, where there has been a flare-up of violence. The ceasefire seems threatened, and President Trump is so desperate to not resume full-fledged hostilities, finds a way to walk it back, to say, we're going to keep pushing forward. Even as there really aren't much in the way of negotiations going on, he wants this war to end. He doesn't want it to spark up again. But this was the most egregious violation yet, and also so striking, as David laid out there. Israel strikes Lebanon, Iran hits back. President Trump tells Netanyahu, no, do not respond. And they do anyway. Now, on one hand, if you're Israel, you feel like you have to. You cannot let an attack from Iran to the homeland go unanswered. That would be an extraordinary sign of weakness. They could not let that occur. But at the same time, that's Netanyahu, first of all, attacking Lebanon in the first place, which starts this new cycle of violence, but also defying Trump, despite Trump couldn't have been more clear that he didn't want this. And in fact, he just came on Truth Social again a few minutes ago saying he's ordering both Israel and Iran to stop. Well, right now, neither of those countries are listening to him.
Yeah, I mean, by my count, I think we're in the fourth or fifth iteration of Trump saying we've almost got a deal, and then something getting in the way of that, getting back to tensions, not necessarily outright hostilities, but clearly not at the point where we've got a deal. And David Ignatius, one of the striking things about this is that in this attack, Iran seems to have changed the kind of chessboard, if you like, because now we are in a position where the American president, because of American gas prices, is shielding Iran effectively from an Israeli retaliation. We did see them strike, but not perhaps in the way that Israel was planning to. I mean, that's a dramatic shift. I'm just thinking we're in one of those if Barack Obama moments had done that moment. Can you imagine what the outcry would have been?
I've never seen this level of tension between the United States and Israel about Israel's basic ability, prerogative to defend itself. Trump said Israel should not retaliate, should not operate against Lebanon any further. He seems to have taken deep interest in Lebanon's ability to try to defend itself. So we are in this situation where the ability of the American president to control Iran and the IRGC obviously limited to close to zero, but also the ability to control our closest ally, Israel, also limited. So I think it's a period adding to the frustration we see in Donald Trump's face in every interview, certainly in the one we're going to talk about with NBC's Kristen Welker. He's a man who's under enormous pressure right now.
So President Trump, in his interview with Meet the Press, was pressed about his 2024 campaign promise that he would not start new wars. Take a listen.
First of all, I didn't guarantee no war. Why would I have built the strongest military in the world? I built our military. I inherited a terrible military. We had no equipment. We had nothing. I built a tremendous military. Biden gave a lot of it away, but it's still a relatively small portion compared to what I built.
But you said it over and over again, Mr.
Why would I
President?
build a military? Now, I didn't want to use this, but I'm doing you and everybody else a big favor. In the midst of the greatest stock market in history, in the midst of the most successful country, because as you know, in the last term, we were a dead country, Kristen. I know you're a big liberal, or a big progressive.
No, I'm just a journalist.
We were a dead country. A year ago, a couple of years ago, we were a dead country. Now we have the hottest country anywhere in the world. And at the all-time hottest point, which is probably now, believe it or not, we just had all brand new stock market records today. But at the hottest point in the history of our country, I took Scott, Howard, I took Pete, I took everybody into a room. I said, I have to do this country, this world, the Middle East, Israel, everybody a favor.
Okay, so Kristen Welker is right. The president said it several times, including in his victory speech, as highlighted by a video of the Bulwark posted on social media. Take a look.
You insisted no new wars.
First of all, I didn't guarantee no war. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars. No more wars, no more disruptions. We will have prosperity and we will have peace. Under Trump, we will have no more wars, no more disruptions, and we will have prosperity and peace for all. I am the candidate of peace.
All right, John Howman, so let's get to the politics of this. Voters were with Trump to an extent, many were, despite his lies about election, threats of retribution, let alone talking about mass deportations and going after the worst of the worst. And now look what's happening. Most people who are being held in detention and deported are not the worst of the worst. Affordability, he calls a joke. And as you heard, he promised no new wars. He promised not to engage in wars around the world. He definitely heard from advisors that it would not be prudent to attack Iran. Many have said exactly what would happen is happening right now. So I'm wondering, will voters still be with him when gas prices are sky high and we're engaged in this complicated, seemingly potential forever war with Iran?
Well, Mika, I mean, look, well, all we can gauge right now is from what we've seen in polling, right? And what we've seen in the election results from the start of Trump 2.0. What are those things we're seeing? We're seeing a president who quite clearly built his political brand and his political reelection campaign in 2024 around a couple of very ironclad things, one of which was, I'm going to bring prices down, and the other of which was, I'm not going to start any more wars. The idea of Trump as the candidate who was against forever wars, against long-term entanglements of the United States in places around the world, that's 10 years of Donald Trump, not just in 2024, but going all the way back to when he started running for president in 2015. So for the president, to make the claims he was making to Kristen Welker yesterday, as if to say, well, I would, anti-war candidate, me, is ludicrous, and that you could have found the same kinds of language. In fact, in his second inaugural, where he said many of the same things there that he said in his victory speech that the Bulwark found the other night. So that is one thing that no voter across the spectrum believes that Trump was ever for getting into a bunch of more long-running entanglements, as I said a second ago. And then the second thing, of course, is the prices issue, which is connected to the war in Iran. We're now looking at a situation where there is no end in sight to this war. And even if the war were to end tomorrow, which is not going to, there's no one in the world of international economics who thinks that the aftershocks to the core prices that we're facing around inflation, not just with gas prices, but food prices and other things, isn't going to take many, many months to get worked out of the system. So the answer is, to your question, is right now the president's at a historically low place in his approval rating. He has lost ground with independents to a dramatic degree. He's seen some erosion among even the most core of his base. And it's why we are looking at an outlook in November. No one can predict the future, but there's not a credible election model around right now that doesn't show the Republicans losing the House of Representatives and with the Senate very much in play. And it doesn't look, and this is something I keep coming back to, I'm a broken record on this. We're now past Memorial Day. In the world of American elections, most of the factors that determine how elections, both presidential elections, but particularly midterm elections, get locked in this far in advance. It's very hard to change the trajectory of the electoral outcome this close in. It doesn't seem that close to a lot of people, but the Congress is more or less out of business now. The members of Congress are not going to start focusing on their reelections. There is not going to be major legislative action between now and November. When we have the midterm vote. So a lot of this stuff is locked in. And again, you can't predict the future. Anything can happen, yada, yada, yada. But right now, the trajectory for Donald Trump politically is terrible. And nothing that's happening in Iran on the ground right now forebodes anything better for him and his party.
Yeah, and for hardworking Americans who might tune out a little bit in the summer, go on vacation, or just try and afford their lives, the one thing that will remind them about politics is when they go to the gas station and pump gas and realize how much it costs once again. As we mentioned, Kristen Welker also repeatedly pushed back on the president's lies about the January 6th insurrection and election fraud. Take a listen.
Do you think anyone who attacked police officers on January 6th should get taxpayer money?
I wouldn't be inclined to say so, but I have to see it. I can tell you this, 97% of those people, you look at them, the FBI or whoever it was, because you had a lot of crooked cops, you had dirty cops. Comey was a dirty cop.
Well,
a guy like Bolton was a dirty cop.
But there's no evidence.
Wait a minute. Oh, you think Comey was a straight cop?
People who pleaded guilty to assaulting police officers.
Comey was a dirty cop.
No, but
they had
the people
FBI,
who assaulted police
listen
officers.
to me. They had FBI agents ushering them into the building. They had FBI go into the building. Those people walking around, they're looking always in this thing. They weren't in. They were being ushered into the building.
Sir. There's no evidence.
You had a bunch of dirty cops, and frankly, what they did was weaponization of our government.
But sir,
there's
let me
a
ask
lot
you
of
about
evidence.
Todd Blanche. Let me ask you about Todd Blanche.
Listen to me.
Let's talk
There's
about Todd Blanche.
tremendous evidence. There's nothing but
not
evidence.
been presented
The election
in a
was
court of
rigged.
law.
It was a dirty election,
Mr.
and it's
President,
happening again right now in California.
You've never presented evidence.
It's happening
that the
right now in
2020 election
California.
was rigged.
Right now, it's looking. Look at what's
Where's
happening
the
in
evidence
California.
to that?
It's
The
4
Republicans
days.
are doing well in
California. It's no, they're not. They're dropping fast because it's a rigged election. Let me tell you, it's 4 days, and they aren't even close to coming up with.
That's how they count
You know
the
why they're
votes in
doing that?
California.
Because they're cheating on the election.
Do you have evidence to support
all
that?
I have to do is look. All I have to do is look.
That's not evidence.
And I listen to people, and let's see what happens.
But, sir, that's not evidence.
Do you think it's appropriate?
That's how they count the votes in California.
Do you think it's appropriate that they have an election and 5 days later they're nowhere close to picking a winner?
State and local officials acknowledge they are slow. They're urging.
No, they're crooked.
They're urging the votes to be counted quickly. That's how they vote in California.
They're crooked, just like you're crooked. Your press is crooked, and Meet the Press is crooked.
To be fair, I'm not crooked, but let's
really.
Let's
well,
continue.
You play right into their hands.
Let's continue.
You're either crooked or you're stupid. You play right into their hands with this rap. You know that these elections are rigged. Your network knows that they're rigged. You know that I won an election in a landslide, and I got 94% bad press.
But, Mr. President,
you know why I got that? Because you have no credibility.
But you've never presented evidence that it was rigged. Let's keep talking about. I want to talk about Todd Blanche.
You have more evidence. There's more evidence than ever presented.
Let's talk
your
about
elections in this country. We're like a third world country.
But, sir,
your elections are crooked, and you're crooked, and Meet the Press is crooked, and so is ABC and CBS and CNN.
But, Mr. President,
you're one-sided crooked networks. All right, let's call it quits because I've had enough. Thank you, darling. Have a good time.
Mr. President, let's please.
Okay, so one can become overwhelmed. So let's just go back to the beginning where he said those folks were ushered in by the FBI. And let's stop right there. Let's stop right there. Let's bring it up. Because then he continued to lie more and lie more and lie more. And then you get, overwhelmed or frustrated. And then he's lied for 2 or 3 minutes. Stop right there. Lying to the American people. Those folks had zip ties. They had a noose. They had weapons in some cases. They defecated at the Capitol, in the halls. They're criminals who were convicted of their crimes. I know the president pardoned them because for some reason in his twisted thinking that these people deserve something more than what they got. Many of them have gone out to commit more crimes since they've been pardoned. Republicans and Democrats alike were running for their lives. So not, everybody has different interviewing styles, and that was absolutely a great effort. But I would stop at the first lie. I wouldn't allow any lies on my program. Joe certainly hung up on the president when he was running for office and started lying. Just hung up on him because you can't have lies. And then this is, some would argue, a strategy. Beat up the media, and so the base can get all excited to see him calling Kristen Welker stupid. You don't allow it. We can't have a complicit media. We can't be involved at all with spreading lies. We can't watch him tell lies and not call them out right away and stay with that first one, because they're all lies. Everything that was said in there, we could go through each one and show how it's a lie. But what he likes is that moment where everyone gets flustered and watches this drama play out, while the president takes something that was twisted, sick, and criminal that happened at our nation's capital. Show the video. You can show the video of the cop getting squeezed in the door, being injured. You can hear, that. Is that the FBI ushering them in? Or is that a cop getting very injured and his life threatened? And I believe at the same time that this was happening, American flags and Trump flags were used to gore people and bash through windows and commit vandalism and try and interfere with the nation's electoral process. Jonathan Lemire.
Yeah, I mean, these are the footage that we show all the time, these images of cops being assaulted, some of whom died in the days later. And let's remember, there's no evidence that the FBI ushered anybody in. But even if they did, that was the FBI under a Donald Trump Department of Justice. Donald Trump, President Trump, was still president on January 6, 2021. There was no Biden FBI. Biden had not taken the oath of office yet. It's a complete farce. And Ben, I mean, first of all, we should note there's a little further clip where Trump takes off the microphone and even steps on it. You can hear the crunch of the NBC microphone breaking as part of the fit he threw during this interview on Friday. And yes, there are we can talk about it through the lens of politics and say Republicans, they don't like this. This doesn't help them in November. We all know that. But let's actually take a step bigger. To Mika's point, this is the President of the United States. Thank you. Thinking it is okay to go on television and lie over and over and over to not only his interviewer, but to the American people. And to think that that's where we are right now, that this is the behavior that he has decided for a decade now is acceptable, and that he has people cheerlead him on as he does so. It is something that is fundamentally damaged and about our democracy right now, that he's able to do this. And I worry about where we're heading, not just between now and November, but in the years ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I do think what you saw there is he's created, an alternate history that I think probably most Americans don't believe, but a lot do. And I think, you're going to, and rest of our careers, there's going to be a big chunk of Americans for whom that is the true history, of January 6th, of his first administration. I mean, I think the other thing you saw really was a argument that the American political system just isn't legitimate, that the reported outcomes of elections aren't real. And that whoever you think ought to win is the winner. And I think I'm not sure whether or not that is preparation for some kind of organized plan to meddle in the midterms, which we actually haven't really seen a ton of evidence for, or just to ignore election results rhetorically and to prepare himself for a second 2 years in which he basically ignores the legitimacy of a Democratic Congress. He's just not backing an inch off of that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also, he's doing it this morning. This morning, he is on Truth Social questioning the results of Los Angeles mayor's race because his favorite candidate, Spencer Pratt, has now fallen out of the top two, and therefore won't make the runoff. And Trump is propagating the lie of election fraud in that race as well.
Good thing we have 3 hours, because we can also talk about Scott Pelley's reporting that he was urged to change and adjust the storytelling in his piece about the death of Renee Good. And that's another way this ultimately revolves back to pressure on the media to try and lie about what really happened in a story, or at least project a lie as much as possible. That's something that we have to get to still, and also exactly where that case stands in the shooting of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. Where's that ICE agent today? Is he on administrative leave? Has there been charges against him? Or is he working and leading a normal life and maybe even making money off of what has happened? What is going on? We need to take every detail and parse through it instead of let a fire hose of falsehoods distract us. So we'll do that. Still ahead on Morning Joe, as Jonathan mentioned, the latest on last week's primary elections in California, as ballots are still being counted in the races for Los Angeles mayor and the governor of the state. Plus, we'll get to Ben Smith's new piece titled Politicians Failed Kids on Social Media. AI is the next battle. And as we go to break, a quick look at the traveler's forecast this morning from former 60 Minutes correspondent Scott Pelley has broken his silence, speaking in an interview with the New York Times for the first time since his firing from CBS News. MS Now reporter Nick McCool has more.
Right now, CBS News, in my view, is on fire.
This morning, the new interview, Scott Pelley speaking out on camera for the first time since his firing last week from the iconic CBS News broadcast, 60 Minutes.
It's like your spouse was murdered.
The mood among the 60 Minutes staff is funereal. That's a word that several of my sources have used with me. They feel demoralized, dismayed.
Pelley dismissed following a reportedly contentious meeting with show staff, accusing newly installed executive producer Nick Bilton of having slender qualifications and saying CBS News editor-in-chief Barry Weiss was murdering 60 Minutes after several top correspondents and producers were let go.
It was the wholesale nature of it. Our senior staff wiped out. We had a triumphal year, so this is incredibly difficult to understand.
Pelley also saying Weiss tried to have him insert bias and falsehoods into a story, giving multiple notes on a report about the killings of American citizens Renee Good and Alex Preddy by federal immigration officers.
Two of the things in the email include, can we make the protesters look more violent? Now, I'm paraphrasing. I don't have the quote, but that's what was communicated to me. And the other thing was Renee Good's car. You need to describe her as driving toward the officer.
Pelley says his team rechecked to make sure nothing was missed before deciding not to take the notes.
That episode of 60 Minutes came within 19 minutes of not making air.
In a statement, a CBS News spokesperson telling MS Now Weiss's points had no political motivation and were proposed solely to make the piece as strong, fair, and accurate as possible. As is frequently the case in any newsroom that operates with collaboration, not everything she raised made it into the final piece.
Is it possible to see this as the system working? She had notes, you felt they didn't make sense to take, the piece ran, and there was no retaliation.
Well, it was the interference that's a problem. And the bigger problem, Lulu, frankly, is not any kind of political influence. The problem was the incompetence.
In the interview, Pelley emotional, talking about the treatment of his colleagues. He also responded to President Trump calling him stupid and a stiff and saying he doesn't care about the country.
You become a journalist because you love the country. And while all the other descriptions that the president used about me might be applicable, not that one. There is no democracy without journalism.
Before Pelley's interview dropped Sunday, 3 60 Minutes correspondents, Leslie Stahl, Bill Whitaker, and John Wertheim, confirmed in a memo to their colleagues they would continue on the show for now, saying, quote, "We don't want to see 60 Minutes die," but they made it clear they were prepared to walk if their independence was not respected. Back to you.
Thanks, Nick. All right, so Ben Smith, things that stood out to me was that there is apparently an email kind of pushing the editing of the Renee Good piece, again, as Scott mentioned, to make the protesters look a different way and to also adjust it to clearly what the eye can see, where Renee Good is trying to get out of the way, the wheels of the car are turning. What comes to my mind is, where is that investigation? What about the Hennepin County investigation? They wanted to investigate that killing. It was taken away from them. There's so many moving parts with that death that I think still need to be covered, and we're going to be pursuing them. But that reporting by Scott Pelley, along with the posture that we just saw the president having against Kristen Welker and the many lies that were repeated during that interview in a seemingly very angry fashion, what do you make of the pressure the media is under right now and the path forward?
Yeah, and I think what you sort of see hints of there is this attempt at CBS to maybe to adjust the coverage just a couple degrees closer to Trump. Like, let's, you know, he's not getting a fair shake from the liberal media. Let's take seriously what was, like, for a week, the White House position, which is Renee Good was trying to kill this cop.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, they subsequently basically abandoned that, and I don't think anybody's really making that case anymore. But we should really treat their arguments seriously. Let's introduce them into the coverage. And one of the things with that is actually not what Donald Trump is looking for from the media, like a slight let's be a little fairer. And I don't know if you caught that in the NBC interview, but he, by the way, he just also attacks CBS. They're just kind of catching strays there, because I don't think he particularly sees any difference. He doesn't actually seem like he's in love with the new regime at CBS and thinks it's great and is, you know, as good as Fox at all. Like, they're getting basically no benefit, I think, as far as I can tell, from the shift to the right, while meanwhile
I disagree.
going to war with their talent.
I think the president gets a benefit because CBS is now
the president gets the benefit.
Yeah.
I just don't think, it doesn't seem to me that CBS has gotten anything about this basically deal with,
to your
the White
point,
House.
it's not enough for Trump for they move a few degrees. He still gets mad at Fox all the time. If they're not 100% with him, he still gets angry. There have been moments where he's been annoyed at Newsmax because he didn't like a particular reporter or a report. I mean, yes, I hear what you're saying, but like he wants it fully.
Right, he wants
full propaganda. That's what he's demanding.
Yes, he would like Mike Lindell TV.
Yeah,
and if he doesn't get that, it just there's no real win there for moving an inch to in his direction. And so they're not only facing all this skepticism from their traditional audience, which includes a lot of Democrats, a lot of people who like Scott Pelley and are listening to Scott Pelley, but also, by the way, from the White House, and of course, you know, the people most concerned about the new CBS are Fox News, are, you know, the News Corp-owned New York Post. And so they're taking all this incoming from the right as well. And it just seems like this is not a strategy that's pleasing anyone.
And we've seen them lose viewers as well. So, I mean, and Caddy, let's connect this to, frankly, our conversation in the first block we played the clip of Trump battling with Kristen Welker and being so, frankly, abusive to her rhetorically in that conversation, because this is all about facts. We can't have a democracy, a healthy working democracy in this country. We can have different opinions, but we have to agree on the same set of facts. And Trump, we know it's just lie after lie after lie from him. And it's very dangerous when media outlets, you know, at times seem to want to shade the truth one way or the other to curry favor. That's damaging to what any of us are trying to do as American citizens.
There's that old phrase, opinion is cheap and facts are priceless. And I think that what Kristen was trying to do was get to the fact in that case. Obviously, what Scott Pelley was trying to do as well as CBS is get to the fact. But Ben is right. This is a president who would like 100% loyalty all the time. Just ask Senator John Cornyn, right? He didn't actually do anything terribly wrong. But if you are 98% loyal, that is not quite good enough. One of the things that struck me, David, listening back over to that Kristen Welker interview again, is the tone of the rhetoric. And have we underestimated, because it's Trump being Trump, just how damaging his assault on political rhetoric has been? I've been thinking this over the last few days, that it is one of the transformational things about the Trump presidency is the way he talks about people, the way he attacks people verbally. And I wonder if that's going to be something that's going to be hard for America, the American body politic, even post-Trump, to come back from.
There are a lot of people, sadly, to me, who really don't like journalists. When they see us trying to do our jobs and criticizing officials, they think we're being rude or arrogant. Trump, in the interview with Kristen Welker, was sputtering. You could just see in his face, he was so angry to be with this person who dared to question him and his assertions. He said at one point, you're either crooked or you're stupid. Just almost sputtering. He was so angry. And I fear that anger, hatred towards the news media is increasingly characteristic of people in his base who view the established news media as the enemy. Our job is to be as balanced. I thought Kirsten was just a perfect model. You know, Mr. President, what's the evidence for that? She never argued with him. She just said, Mr. President, what's the evidence for that? And that's the proper role for us. It's terrible to see CBS 60 Minutes, one of the great institutions of our business, prized by journalists and by viewers, now seemingly under attack from its management. It's tough to see that. But I do think we got from Kristen Welker a picture of exactly what good journalists say. What's the evidence? I want to hear the evidence. Let me give you the counter evidence. And in that position, I think we'll do just fine.
John Hallman, the politics of this has been do you believe the president gets traction when he has a scuffle with a reporter like Kristen Welker? What's the gain for him politically?
Well, the president's base hates the media. To David's point, I think that horse is already let out of the barn door a long time ago. The president's been ginning up. Look, there's been animosity towards the so-called liberal media long before Donald Trump, but he has made it a central part of his political appeal. And for a guy who, for a variety of reasons, we were talking about this earlier, Mika, has done a bunch of things to alienate his base, whether it's the war in Iran, the Epstein crisis, the Epstein scandal, and his betrayal of the base on that subject. This is someone who does feel as though he needs to keep whipping up the base. And one of the core elements of the cultural appeal that he's had to, again, his base, I'm talking about the hardcore MAGA people, is to beat up on liberal media. I think that you could argue that it is counter. There's that for every MAGA voter who loves seeing Kristen Welker get beat up like that, you're doing damage to yourself with independence. But I do think Trump's instinct politically is always to go back to the base. The thing I most want to say here, though, is to Ben's point and to Lamir's point, I totally agree that Donald Trump will never be satisfied, no matter what 60 Minutes does, no matter what anybody in the press does. If you bend 10 degrees, if you don't give him Mike Lindell TV, he's still going to bitch and moan. But I will tell you what Paramount is getting out of this. Paramount's getting the ultimate prize that it wants. Paramount needed to get the federal government to allow it to buy Warner Brothers Discovery. And that, the various efforts, not just the 60 Minutes, but across the board, the variety of things that Paramount has done, of which the appointment of Barry Weiss, her behavior in that job, the evidence that we heard from Scott Pelley there, I'd love to see more reporting on this, because the things that he asserts that she tried to do to the program to insert political bias are, you know, in our careers, all of our careers, would be firing offenses for an editor at any real news organization. But those things are all done to one purpose. The eyes on the prize here for Paramount isn't about getting Donald Trump to say that he loves 60 Minutes all of a sudden, or that, you know, he's satisfied. It's getting the regulatory approval to go forward with a multi-billion-dollar merger. That is what is at the core of all of this. And so far, that effort, again, undertaken on a variety of different levels, but that effort seems to have worked pretty well.
John Hallman, thank you very much. The Washington Post, David Ignatius, thank you as well. And coming up on Morning Joe, attorneys for the Justice Department try to argue the president could tear down the Statue of Liberty without any legal repercussions. We'll go over what went on in federal court on Friday. Plus, the war